Are you looking for a cookie that's going to be chewy, satisfying, and delicious, but that won't break the bank when it comes to your points, bites, or calories, or macros? Then I think I have the one for you. These are my Chewy Oatmeal cookies, and they're coming up next. Hello and welcome to my kitchen. My name is Roy. I'm a home cook, amateur baker, and I created this YouTube channel to share some of the recipes that have helped me to lose, at this point, 127 pounds. So today, it's going to be one of my recipes, and it's going to be for Chewy Oatmeal cookies. Now these are going to be pretty good sized cookies that are going to be 2 bites for 1 or 5 bites for 2, or blue points. I'm on the iTrack Bites Better Balance plan, which is similar to the WW Blue plan. So those two should be about the same, but again, always put ingredients into your own recipe builder, because the ingredients I use might be slightly different than the ones that you use, depending on what you find. So I have my oven preheating to 375 degrees. And I have 2 baking sheets that are lined with parchment paper. If you don't have parchment paper, just spray them with some cooking spray or baking spray, just so you make sure that they release and don't get stuck to the pan. For this recipe, you are going to need 3/4 cup of flour. You're going to need 1 scoop of protein powder, and you can use any protein powder that you want. On the recipe, I list it as vanilla. That's what I used the first time, but I'm out of that. So today I'm going to use some peanut butter powder, which I'm using the Syntrax Matrix. It's called peanut butter cookie. So I'm doing that. I figured that would be a great pairing with the oatmeal. You can use any flavored protein powder that you want. You just want 1 scoop, and it'll be about 30 to 35 grams of protein powder. We're also going to have 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt, a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, not baking powder. The baking powder is baking soda with some acid in it, cream of tartar or something like that. So you just want some baking soda. Now you could replace baking powder for the baking soda, but you would have to use a lot more, and that could throw off the flavor, the texture. So it's best to stick with the baking soda. You would need 3 times as much baking powder as you do soda, so it would be 1.5 teaspoons, which may work out fine, but I haven't tried it that way, so I just used the baking soda. We also have 4 tablespoons or 1/4 cup of light butter, and this is the light butter that I use. I can't believe it's not Butter Light. That's just the one I prefer. I found it to be the best on points or bites. You're also going to need just a 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. You're going to need 3/4 of a cup of a brown sugar substitute. I use Swerve. If you follow me, you probably know that. And a 1/2 cup of granulated sugar replacement. Again, I use the Swerve. You could use monk fruit or anything that's a 1-to-1 exchange for sugar. I also have a 1/2 cup of pureed pumpkin, not pumpkin pie spice. Now, someone asked me on my last recipe if you could use applesauce or even mashed bananas in place of the pumpkin. You can. But because applesauce tends to be more liquid than the pureed pumpkin, I would probably cut that down to maybe a 1/3 cup instead of the 1/2 cup of pumpkin. Okay, here we have 1 whole egg and 1 egg yolk. Having an extra yolk will just give it a richness, that chewiness that you're hoping to get. And then we have a teaspoon of vanilla. You could use another extract if you prefer, but I just like the vanilla. It's very general. It's not going to conflict too badly with whatever protein powder you put in there. And the star of the show, 3 cups of old-fashioned oats. All right, so the first step in these cookies is to take the flour and add the protein powder to it. Just whisk those two together. Add in the salt and the baking soda. And just give it a good whisk. Make sure it's fairly well combined. Then we're going to set this aside. So next we want to melt this light butter. I'm going to melt it in the microwave. Some microwaves might be a little stronger than others. I'm going to do 30 seconds first, see where it is, and then do another 30 seconds, and then continue from there. All right, so the butter is pretty well melted. There are still a few little clumps, but once you mix it around a little bit, you'll see they melt right away. And the first thing you're going to add into the butter is the cinnamon. Now, the reason that you're adding the cinnamon first into the butter rather than into the dry mixture is that this warm butter is going to bloom that scent. So that little 1/4 teaspoon, you're going to notice a bit more. Like I can smell it right now wafting up from the bowl. It helps to accentuate the flavor, even though it's a small amount. Okay, next we are going to add in the brown sugar replacement and the regular sugar replacement. And you want to do this while the butter is still somewhat warm, so it'll help to melt some of that brown sugar especially, which tends to clump up. Okay, now we're going to add in the pumpkin puree. Make sure we get all of that goodness out, because this is what's going to provide us with the moisture in our cookie. So the last part of this step is just to add the egg and egg yolk and whisk that into a homogeneous mixture. And I almost forgot, the vanilla also goes in with the eggs. And just whisk that in. And then we're going to switch from a whisk to a spatula or a spoon. A wooden spoon is preferable, just because you want something that's going to be sturdy and not chance to break with the weight of all the oatmeal once it stiffens up the batter. Okay, so now we are going to add in the flour mixture that we stirred up earlier, the flour and protein powder. And you don't have to be too gentle. It's not like you're trying to keep air in a batter like for pancakes. You just want to get this combined as much as possible before you add in the oatmeal. Okay, so that looks good. So now we add in the 3 cups of oatmeal. And this is where you might want to be a little more delicate, not because you're going to ruin the oats, but just because you don't want them flying out of the bowl. Now, if you wanted to at this point, you could add in other things like maybe dried cranberries, raisins, which I'm not a fan of, but a lot of people enjoy. Chocolate chips, maybe some Lily's chips. I do have some Lily's pumpkin chips, which would probably be good in here, but I'm not going to mess with the bites as I have them now. I'm just going to do them as is. Okay, so there we have our cookie dough. I will get the pans and we will portion this out. Now this recipe makes 18 cookies the way that I'm doing it. You could make more cookies that were smaller for fewer bites, It all depends on what you want to do. If you do that though, just make sure you adjust the time, lower the time for a smaller cookie so that they don't burn. But I'm going to take about 3 tablespoons, which is a number 24 scoop. Now, if you've never used these ice cream scoops that aren't just a regular ice cream scoop, there are numbers. If you fold in the little part that scoops everything out, that swipes through the bowl, if you swoop through there, I know you probably cannot see it, although I will try to get close. There is a number on here. This is a number 24. That's about 3 tablespoons. But you can portion it in whatever way you want that approximates it. You could weigh it out, do it that way. It's all up to you. So I'm going to scoop these up. Now you're going to do 9 cookies per sheet, and you're going to bake them one at a time, because when you put 2 cookie sheets into the oven, I mean, I will on occasion, but then you have to go in, you rotate them to make sure they're all getting the same air, the same heat, and they're not burning on one side and not cooked on the other. So it's just easier just doing them one at a time, and it's a very short bake, I think like 10 to 12 minutes. So it shouldn't be a problem. Now I had a little left over, so rather than trying to add in another cookie and tweak the points or bites, I'm just going to split the remainder amongst the rest of these cookies so that I still have 18. Okay, I am back and I have some damp hands, because what you're going to do is press these down. They're not going to expand much like a typical cookie might spread. So you have to pat them down and try to get them a little thinner just so they bake more evenly. You want it to be about a like 2.5-inch cookie. You don't want it to be too thick. If it does happen to be a little too thick, you may need to bake them a little longer. But about like that. Okay, so the cookies are all pressed out, all spread evenly. So we're going to put one pan into the oven for 10 to 12 minutes. I'm going to rotate the pan halfway through, just because sometimes front to back there could be differences in your oven. So it's always a good idea to rotate cookies. If you've ever had cookies where one side of the pan seemed to get darker, it's because there's a hot spot there. So rotating the pan halfway through helps distribute the heat a little more evenly. So I'll put these in the oven and I'll be back when they come out. Okay, so the second batch is out of the oven. You can see, if I take these mitts off, or this one, around the edges, it's just starting to get dark, a little bit of color. That's how you know when they're done. Now I'm gonna let those sit there for about 5-6 minutes before I take them off like I did with these other ones and put them on a cooling rack to cool completely. So what I usually do is, once I've put the second batch in the oven and have to rotate it at that halfway point, that's when I take the first batch off of the cookie sheet. You can see a little bit of brown color down at the bottom. Just exactly what you want. And I usually pick them up with a spatula, just because I don't want to lift them up and they're still too soft and then they break apart. These are pretty sturdy though, so I don't think that is going to be a problem. Now they're still a little warm, but I'm going to break one of these open so you can see how thick and chewy these things are. I'm not going to take a bite just because my jaw is a little stiff. And when I take a bite, usually that first bite, like I've mentioned in other videos, can be a little difficult to chew. So I don't want to do that, but I do want to show you the interior and what they look like there, so that you have a good idea of what you're going to be getting. As I said before, each cookie is going to be 2 bites or 2 points. I follow Better Balance, and that's equal to the WW Blue. If you're on, I think it's green that lets you have oatmeal, these would probably be maybe 0 points, I don't know. But most of it comes from the oats and the little bit of flour, so definitely put it in the calculator and see what you get. Now if you're following calories, these are 97 calories each with the ingredients that I use. And if you're following macros, the fat is 2.6 grams, the carbs are 28.9 grams, and the protein is 4.3 grams. But again, those might vary slightly if you have a different protein powder. If you use a different brand of oatmeal, maybe that will throw it off slightly. But it will be around that range. So I hope you enjoyed this recipe. I hope you will give it a try and let me know in the comments below if you did. And also like this video for me if you would, and subscribe to the channel. I'd love having you along for this journey. Now if you find there's someone who might enjoy this, share the video. And don't forget to go to my blog. The link is in the description box. And you can get all of these recipes as well as some others that I have not made videos for yet. And until next time, I hope you enjoy these, because I know I will. Bye.